bakwetu morokeni, morokeni bakwetu, morokeni bakwetu, morokeni bakwetu. Greetings to you from Namibia, greetings to you from all of us, greetings to you from Namibia, greetings to you from all of us, greetings to you from Namibia, greetings to you from all of us, greetings to you from Namibia, greetings to you from all of us. Tumela kaupela, tumela ho, tumela kaupela, tumela kaupela, tumela ho, tumela kaupela, tumela kaupela, tumela ho, tumela kaupela, tumela kaupela, tumela ho, tumela kaupela. Morokeni bakwetu, morokeni, morokeni bakwetu, morokeni bakwetu, morokeni, morokeni bakwetu,
Dear staff and students of the University of Namibia, distinguished members of the public, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great honor this morning to address you on UNAM's position on the admission of NSSO Level 3 into the university. The purpose of this address is to provide what I hope will be relevant information, which will provide clarity and achieve understanding as to why we are where we are, both as a university and as part of the education system in the country. Before I do that, let me just say that there has been a video clip that has been circulating for the last couple of days. That video clip is a cut from a discussion I had with my staff and students in September 2019. That discussion was held in terms of the University of Namibia Act 18 of 1992, Section 14, which provides for an academic assembly and gives the powers to the Vice Chancellor to discuss matters of interest to students and staff. Needless to say, the context of that discussion and the rationale was purposefully left out by whoever made that clip and circulated it to cause confusion. I nevertheless do recognize that that clip attracted some public debate on the matter, to which I now wish in a small way contribute to that discussion and hopefully create understanding of the university management's current position on the issue. I must from the onset say that the University of Namibia sees no contradiction between its position and the position of the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture. We fully embrace and support the reform the government of Namibia has embarked upon. I wish to assure the public and our government, as well as potential students, that we are with you to ensure that that reform fulfill its purpose and its mandate.
Sorry to disrupt, VC. I just have a question. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to know what is the history of education in Namibia and why is a reform or support of that necessary?
Thank you for the question. But before I respond to that, I think it is necessary that I give an epistemological context to the history of the issue of education reform in general and in particular in Namibia. The advent of what we would call post-secondary education in Namibia is from the 60s and 70s, when mostly church-related schools were set up to establish post-secondary training, many of which focused on the training of teachers. And we all know them. Those were set up by Catholic churches, Lutheran Church, Adventist, and so on. Now, the education reform itself in the country is very fundamental, because education system is part of a system that is required for any country to develop and fulfill its developmental objectives. It is a determinant. The quality of that education system determines whether or not a country achieves its developmental objectives or it fails to do so. Education reform, if I may just define it, is a term that is used to describe the goal of changing public education, not keeping it, but changing public education. That's what reform is about. And in terms of, it changes the public education in terms of its foundations and practice. Ideally, and most often, this reform is informed by evidence that guides the rationale for reform, what must be reformed, and the focus of what must be achieved. Here, it is important for all reformers, and as we have seen scientific studies point to the need to adopt policies and methods that are most effective and responsive and do allow for good return on investments by public entities. So educational reforms are conducted to transform education structures, to improve coordination, allow successful articulation, and raise the quality of education in the country. And in doing so, reliable and valid evidence with rigorous analysis is always critical and is required. And I believe this is what has been done so far in terms of the reforms of education in this country. But for this reason, it is a constant to now and then reform and to adjust the systems, align it to current national development goals, to its desires, as well as to ensure international competitiveness. It's something that we must not forget. And education reform also contributes to a country's international competitiveness. It can't just be on the national but international competitiveness. Namibia is, of course, no exception to this phenomenon, and I will not dwell into the pre-independence phase reforms, but I just wish to say that reforms in Namibia are not new. But I now wish to turn to the genesis of higher education system in the post-independence context. Soon after independence, the founding president, Dr. Sam Nujoma, established a presidential commission on higher education in Namibia. That commission's terms of reference was, among others, the following. Number one, to determine the qualifications for admission to and the duration of various higher education courses. Two, to define the control of higher education and its relationship with government. Number three, to determine the range and levels of programs in the higher education system. And lastly, amongst others, was to determine the extent of the higher education system in the medium and long term in relation to national human resource needs. This commission is commonly known as the Turner Commission. The commission has submitted its report to the head of state on 23rd of September 1991. It recommended the establishment of the following institutions: the National University of Namibia, the Polytechnic of Namibia, the National Council for Higher Education, and the National Research Council, as well as the National Qualifications Authority. That was way back in 1991. And as we know, some of the institutions were only later established. For example, the National Commission for Research, Science and Technology was only established, I believe, in 2013. So the background to how the higher education system in the country is coming from not 1991. I do not want to undermine or underplay the fact that higher education was intended even before independence through the union, which was based in Lusaka. But I just want to concentrate on what happened after independence, which is maybe a matter that is now of interest. It is, of course, impractical for me to try and repeat the whole history here. Suffices to say what was recommended mostly was achieved, and the University of Namibia was established a year after that commission report was tabled in August 1992. In September 1992, the document, which is here, the university entry options in Namibia was established. This established what would be the points on which different levels of education would be determined as an entry level in the university. And again, these reports were submitted to the heads of state and indeed were taken into account when the first enrollments of the University of Namibia was undertaken. These entry points were to assist the University of Namibia to balance between taking into account the negative effects of apartheid education. In other words, the fact that the quality of education was considered to be low, the university could not to set its standards to first-class universities already. It had to respond to the realities on the ground by extending a hand to those who may not otherwise qualify. Also, these entry points were meant to ensure that the University of Namibia entry requirements are gradually improved as and when the basic education is able to produce the levels that would require higher entry requirements. In other words, the expectation already then was that entry into the university levels would be at A levels. But it was considered that because the majority of the people could not enter the university at A levels, it needed to come up with bridging courses and enable to take the level that was being produced in the country at the time. As a university, we have been doing these bridging courses. Foundations, science foundations, mature age entry, recognition of prior learning, and so on, have been modes in which the university has been accepting students. After 21 years of existence, UNAM needs to move to the entry-level equivalent to that of its peers, regionally and internationally. Why? Because the basic education has reformed itself to allow for that to happen by introducing advanced subsidiary. This is a growth you would expect of any country, and it shouldn't stay stagnant. Now, the Commission on Higher Education, together with the report on Education for All, which is emanating from constitutional rights provided for in our Constitution, had overall goals. What were those overall goals that we all needed to take into account, which we still do? These goals are equity, quality, democracy, and relevance. Taking those into account, Namibia embarked on education reforms that saw the end of Bantu education, the introduction of Higgs, that's the Cambridge University system, the NSSCO, and the intervention programs such as ETSIP. All these programs were meant to improve education delivery in the country. If you look at these statistics, you will find that the objective of equity, the objective of access, and the objective of democracy have to a very large extent been achieved. What seems to be an issue in many reports is quality. Many research studies have been done on the challenges of education, particularly basic education in the country. And a good source for this are the reports of the Southern and Eastern Africa Consortium for Monitoring Education Quality, the so-called SACMAC tests. These tests assess the competencies of learners in English, in mathematics, and in science. You can check those reports for yourselves and you'll see where Namibia stands. And it's those facts that have informed the need for curriculum review and the need to introduce a curriculum that would assist the country to move forward in terms of its quality. These reports and others were analyzed seriously and rigorously and have been considered as part of the reform processes, including the Namibia Education Conference of 2011. I wish to highlight that also part of the reform that we see today includes a report on comprehensive and holistic review and reform of higher education system in Namibia in relation to its contribution to the achievement of Vision 2030. This report is a result of the Education Conference of 2011, and it was submitted and announced publicly. It was announced publicly and submitted to the University of Namibia by the late Honorable Dr. Abraham Iyambo on the 13th of September 2012. It was a result of the cabinet decision in 2010, which asked for a review of the education system to see how it would align to the skills deficit and improve the investments that government made, the return on investment that government makes. In his letter, Honorable Minister asked UNAM to exhaustively discuss this report as it relates to higher education and particularly to UNAM.
Excuse me, VC, I just have another question. Are Namibian grade 12 learners, school leavers, ready for tertiary education, for higher education? What are the current challenges of admitting grade 12s? Are they ready? Do you propose that they are ready? Or what are the challenges of admitting them or having them in higher education, into the higher education system?
Thank you for that question. The question was interrogated not just by us here, but by the others. And in that report that I just cited, and that report actually benefited from a benchmarking of 12 countries, including Africa, USA, Asia, and Europe. And it highlighted the challenges facing higher education, and it asked that question, and I quote, "Are Namibian grade 12 school leavers ready for higher education?" Unquote. That was the question. What was the answer in that report? On page 4 of that report, the answer to the question was no. And it added, if the need I quote, "If the need for improved performances of school leavers is not addressed adequately now, our higher education institutions will have to increase their level of involvement in a variety of so-called bridging and foundation programs. These are very costly ways to equip prospective students with the intellectual and other skills to cope with the demands of higher education study. Hence, more will have to be done at grade 11 and grade 12 levels to support learning and better equip students adequately for entry into higher education." Unquote. You would agree with me that typically universities are not meant to be bridging institutions. That's not the purpose or mission of universities, to be bridging. They are there to sustain and produce mid to high level skills, human resources, capacity and competencies for a country to sustain itself. In Namibia, we have created institutions that do bridging, and we should allow them to carry out their mandates. In the same vein, we should allow universities to carry out their mandates that they should do, not to bridge. But again, I said earlier, and I want to repeat, that the university has been bridging because of the context, but given the fact that the basic education reform is now able to produce the people that would otherwise enter the university, we are now ready to do so.
And see, maybe if I can come in there, on the question on whether these grade 12s are adequately prepared. I think one of the biggest issues is that neither the new NSSCO, the grade 11s, the so-called grade 11s, nor the legacy program, the grade 12s, adequately prepare the learners for university studies. It does prepare them for the world of work, it does prepare them for non-formal education and other things, but not for university studies. And there's a big difference between both the new NSSCO, which in many instances there was some increase in content, and the old one, and the AS. It's not only about content. It's about the soft skills. It's about the assessment, the different types of assessment in these two different programs. NSSCO, whether it's the old legacy grade 12 or the new grade 11 NSSCO, when we look at the assessment, it's more straightforward questions. It's more list this, name this, what is this, define this. When you go to AS, we expect from the learners much more extended answers. We see in the examination papers there will be much less scaffolding of questions. In other words, you won't ask one question which answer leads to the next question. But it will require from them to be able to apply the knowledge that they have. And those are the skills that is required at university. And that was already, as the VC indicated, acknowledged by the report from NSCCH in 2012, that grade 12 learners are not prepared for university studies. And it's not because of the content. There's nothing wrong with the content. And even the new content is better than the old one. But unfortunately, it's more than content.
Thank you for that. So I'll be with you just now. So we are of the understanding that this is why the idea of advanced subsidiary, AS grade 12, was mooted and indeed endorsed, because the facts pointed to the fact that there was a need to do so. And to serve as the bridge for students intending to pursue higher education or enter into universities. And I must emphasize again that we fully subscribe to this policy decision and stand ready to support it. Now, the report that was tabled by the Ministry of Education, remember that time it was combined. So I'm not saying basic education or higher education, it was the Ministry of Education. It was overseeing both basic and higher. That report also asked, are higher education institutions still true to their mandate? And it zoomed on particularly at UNAM and at the then Polytechnic. And I want to highlight what it said in regard to UNAM. I'm not going to speak about what it said about other institutions. The report highlighted that, and that's on page 5 of that report, it indicated, and I quote, "It is unfortunate that UNAM has a very high enrollment in certificate and diploma programs and a very low enrollment in the master's and doctoral programs, and that UNAM's enrollment patterns do not follow the normally accepted trends for general universities, which would have much lower levels of enrollment in certificate and diploma programs and higher levels of enrollment in master's and doctoral degree programs." Now, Cabinet did discuss that report and gave the Ministry of Education a directive to move towards, and I quote, "limiting any further expansion of UNAM into certificate and diploma programs and support it in concentrating on postgraduate study and specifically doctoral study programs," unquote. This was a directive from Cabinet to the Ministry of Education. Now, furthermore, it is our understanding that the report was discussed at Cabinet also on 12th of December 2012, and the following directive to the Ministry of Education was also given, namely to, and I quote 2.1, "to meet with the leaders of higher education institutions to discuss closely the report and charter the way forward," unquote. This was done, and a number of UNAM experts were seconded to be part of the technical committees of the Ministry of Education following the 2011 conference. The committees met and did their work diligently until they were disbanded in 2014. UNAM members of the committees made submissions which were discussed at both the Dean's Committee and Senate. The understanding was and still is that the basic education curriculum would be revised and improved to the level of advanced subsidiary to allow those who wish to pursue university education to progress from grade 11, level 3, to AS level 4, which then becomes the prerequisite for entering university. That was the understanding and still is the understanding. On the NQF, NSSO is at level 3, is a level 3 qualification, and AS is a level 4 qualification. The entry level requirement for UNAM B degrees is level 5. You can see if one exits at level 3 and you're entering at level 5, what happens? Logically, this prompted UNAM as a responsible university to align its curriculum and offering with the aims, objectives, and principles of the reform. Consequently, a major curriculum transformation process has been undertaken where programs are reinvented in order to enable production of competent human resources armed with core competencies required for the transformation of Namibia into a knowledge-based economy and enable our graduates to play a major role in the 4th and 5th industrial revolution, as well as to play a major part in employment creation. This is why the university is taking this position, because of this context and the reforms that were required resulting from the changes emanating from basic education. I now wish to invite my colleague, Professor Gideon, to speak about this curriculum transformation framework, what it is and what is intended, what are the core competencies that we want to see from our graduates.
Thank you very much, VC. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me stand on the protocol that you have just observed in your opening. As we all know, for 30 years, the Ministry of Basic Education has been offering the current system for 30 years. It's a very wonderful system, but I think for 30 years, one would actually expect us to really react and come up with something else. The Ministry of Basic Education has decided actually to reform the existing curriculum. This is a wonderful opportunity for tertiary institutions to be able to improve and also respond to the issues that has been affecting, the education, a tertiary education or a tertiary level. Now, the question is, why do you think we have to, the basic education have to reform? There should have been issues. There must have been a discussion. There must have been a process, and the process is the one that has informed this actual reform to take place. And the purpose or the reason why there should be a reform is simply because we are saying we would like actually to have graduates with unique skills, competencies, and abilities actually to be able to perform in the world of work. So these students must be matured, and they need to be very independent and global as well. So now this is really the purpose why the whole thing has to be, or the reform has to take place. Now, the University of Namibia observed these developments with keen interest, and we have to respond and reform our education. So we embarked on the curriculum transformations to then include some of these aspects that I just mentioned, so that at least we produce that graduate, who is very rounded and be able to compete, the way we want them to. So we now change the curriculum, structurally, and we also change the admission requirements. So I'm not going to dwell too much on the admission requirements, because I think the registrar will get into the admission requirements later. But I will focus more on the curriculum. So during the reform process of the University of Namibia, we had to consult all the stakeholders because we needed inputs. So what it means is that we started actually engaging the staff members, we engaged the students, we engaged the external stakeholders like the Council of Higher Education and and others. So to get inputs and also to understand what is their reaction. And I can tell you the truth, everyone was in agreement to say, I think this is the right time for change. But I think what I wanted actually to probably focus on is to say the reform, when I look at the curriculum for basic education, it really gives universities, not only UNAM, universities, a competitive edge in terms of the offering. So what it means is that we know exactly where to start and where to end in terms of the learning outcomes, because that is what we need to focus on, so that our graduates really are on par with others in the region and also in the world at large. Now, we had to investigate to try to understand the type of a student or a learner we are getting from grade 12 with the new curriculum. I can tell you the truth, we are so happy to receive the grade 12 next year into the university, so that at least we can achieve what we have been aiming for quite some times. And the reason why I'm saying this, I'm in full agreement with the VC to say we support basic education so that they can successfully implement this curriculum without disrupting the process. Because we need these students, we need this type of student to come to the university to help us to really conform to the standard that we have set so far in the reform of the curriculum. This curriculum will actually focus on new skills and competencies, and the content will also help them actually to do things completely different. So basically, there will be a new way of doing things. Students will spend much of their time with industry because we want them to be very practical. This is what the curriculum will talk about. Now, I'm not saying what we have now cannot be done in this way, but I'm saying the type of curriculum we have seen basic education has deployed now can really help us to leverage these type of things because it is not currently in the existing curriculum. And that is really what prompted us to say we cannot now avoid this opportunity. As a university, we have now the best chance to improve the education in the country. And we are leading in that way so that at least, we can set the standards. And I think if we can work together as higher education, tertiary institutions, we will be able to have we'll be able to have quality education in the end. I think I would like actually to probably just mention a few things before I give a chance to the registrar and then the other colleagues to come in so that they can be very specific. What I would like actually to indicate is basically to say the elements that we have included into the new curriculum speaks to the graduates who should actually create an impression in the society. And that is really what we have thought of. There has been a lot of studies that have gone into this process to ensure that we really benchmark with our peers, be it in the region or in the world at large. And the spin-off, as the VC have said, is quality graduates that comes actually with this reform. Having said this, I just would like to indicate that as a university, we have transformed our curriculum. We are very happy to receive grade 12 graduates or grade 12 students next year so that our admission requirements are on par with what we have actually introduced in our curriculum transformations. So, VC and the colleagues, having said that, I think I have elaborated a few issues that could assist us to understand. And I would like now to request the registrar to just explain in details the admission requirements that we have introduced, and then from there, hopefully we'll ask Professor Mas and Dr. Maggie to come in as well. Thank you, VC.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Maybe before Maggie and the registrar comes, can I have this off? In the transformation framework, we have what we call core competencies. If I am not wrong, there are about 14 or so. And those core competencies are things like creative thinking, critical thinking, problem solving, being global citizenship, civic duties, being responsible. We are not going to be continue training people to know what. We are interested in how they know and why they know what they know, not just to state facts. We want to ensure that the graduates that are coming from AS are the ones that we can use through various platforms that we have to hopefully one day this country have Nobel laureates, have people who can influence the world. And we believe we have such people, but we have to prepare them for this world such that when they come ready, they are not frustrated. And I can give you, if it's necessary, our experiences in terms of what happens to the students when they come here and they are not ready. is very traumatic, and we don't want that to continue. Really, we have to take care of our children and make sure that when they come to the university, they are ready to enjoy and thrive in that university life rather than to struggle. But maybe the question on the mind of people is now, what does this mean? Does the university say we are only going to take AS? No, we will still take a combination, and that is what I think the registrar will now come to. Please.
Maybe Disi, just before she comes in,
Yes.
I thought on understanding and further unpacking the curriculum transformation is exactly what you've just alluded to, that is so critical for our audience out there to comprehend and understand and come along with us. And it's exactly that change from only focusing on content. You know, we often say when we advocate for our curriculum transformation process across the country at all our campuses, that it's no longer about content alone. It is about those competencies that you've now, and competencies that you've unpacked now to our audience as well. And that is really the crux of the matter. The bottom line is knowledge is everywhere these days. It's on these glowing rectangles, as Prof. Mast would often refer to it, every day. But it's moving us in another direction. And that's where that AS candidate is really, will be groomed now in the system to come into and absorbing that and further building on those competencies. But also the employability of that student is what we need to focus on. Those attributes that the employers out there would like to see in a UNAM graduate. I think that's part of the whole process, why we are not just revising our curriculum, and that's the difference here. We are transforming our curriculum, transforming it with all these ideas and research and input in mind. And that is because we also have to make sure as a university that we are responding to the changing landscape of higher education. That is in line and to fit in with the fourth and fifth and further industrial revolutions. I just thought it's also critical for us to really, really understand why are we going to transform, and why are we so wholeheartedly waiting for that AS candidate come 2022 with combinations of taking O-level and AS levels. Thank you so much for that input opportunity.
Thank you. Registrar.
Thank you very much, VC, for that, and good morning to everybody out there. Yes, I will just continue on what has been said by actually indicating the admission criteria that the university currently has in place and what is being crafted for how we continue moving on when we now have the expectation of learners exiting basic education with AS level of qualification. In short, the university really does welcome this potential and considerable, and it's considering the improvement that it's bringing with. Thereby, the grade 12 next year, which will be the AS, will live with the competencies and levels expected to join the university, as has been said. Our current admission generally is that of 25 points in 5 subjects and a C or better in English. That is more the standard. It then gets to differ course to course and up to the level of what the profession, for those professional programs, how many points they will demand. And those will be your courses like in the health profession, in the engineering, in the law, and all that. And then it also goes on to differ as per program, whereby the combination of subjects comes in, who goes in which program and what requirements. Is it a B in this subject, a C in this subject, and or which? Otherwise, the 25 points with a C in English plus then the other subject as per the need of that program is what our current admission criteria are. It has then been a situation that is what was expected for the current 2021 learners to apply for, because these regulations need to go through the Senate for approval. And it's that approval that will then now be a process taken to go and get approval for the next criteria when we now have the AS students coming into the process. What are we talking about in what we are referring to 2021 is different from the process moving on from 2022, and I'm now going to go into some details that are currently available on what the admission criteria will be for the year 2022 onwards. What we are proposing and we have in place here is that for the current grade 11s, who are the new NSSCO, we encourage that they proceed to AS, and after that they will have the subjects that makes the combination that will be required for their admission into the university for 2021. There will be a first option. That option would be that students will now be required to have 27 points, which will be a combination of 2 subjects in AS and 3 subjects in NSSCO, which is at least C or higher. And again, in that combination, English must still be a C or above. Alternatively, that student will have to have a total of 27 points, which is a combination of 3 subjects in AS and 2 subjects at NSSCO level, D or higher. English again will be expected to be a C, symbol, or above. Those will be the combinations that will be required for students to make up 27 points. And then we do not forget that there will be students or learners who would maybe have more subjects in NSSCO as opposed to AS, and those students may still, and they will still have an option to enter qualifications in lower level, in lower accreditation level, the diplomas or the certificates. And for that group of students, the combination would be that they should at least have 23 points on the UNAM scale, 2 subjects on AS, and 3 subjects on SSCO. So even at that level, we would appreciate that the students will have at least 2 subjects on AS, and then at NSSCO, a level D or higher. And then in this category of certificates and diplomas, English must be a D at the NSSCO level. That will be where the accommodation in the diplomas and certificates will come in. And again, with the above criteria, the specifics as per the program will come in. Now we talk about what about others? Yes, we still will have space for other forms of entry into the university, whereby the recognition of prior learning program that we have will still be in place. The mature age entry process and requirements will still be in place. And also the scheme we have that accommodates the marginalized and the previously disadvantaged groups will also be accommodated. Those other schemes and other avenues will still be available. Then it comes to a question of why has these criteria changed, and why would the university want to approach it different from for next year as opposed to this year, when we are talking about the 2 certificates of grade 11 and grade 12, which is the same. Yes, the certificate has got the same content. And it will now be necessary that I go into the details of what do we mean when we're talking about the certificate or the qualification which is the same, and why the university will have to see it different. The university does not see it different. The university recognizes that the current or the NSSCO qualification is a level 3 qualification. As per the NQF, which is the national framework on where these qualifications are accredited, there are certain things that are considered, and I will just mention 3 of them. To give a qualification a level, one looks at the demand or complexity of learning outcome of that in that context, of which the competency is applied, the degree of autonomy or independence of that learner when they are exiting at that level, and the responsibility that is expected of that learner in the guided environment or in a set task that is presented to them. That is when then NQF has got levels from 1 to 10 in the different Namibian qualification. NSSCO is a level 3 qualification, and the university, as much as it has entry certificates of level 5, the VC has previously indicated how there is a request that the university looks into getting in the qualifications that are a higher level and not necessarily have a more lower level entry than the higher. Then what are these levels telling us? The levels are telling us the capability developed in a learner. And they are telling us, or they are reflecting the integration of knowledge and skill by that learner. And they are also telling us how that can be understood, or how that learner can understand, and how that learner can apply and transfer the knowledge learned. If now we have to continue when there is a potential for getting the level 4 AS, which is AS is going to be a qualification at level 4, which then brings that quality and those aspects that I have just mentioned to a different level than the current NSSCO, and thereby our belief that it brings the students in an environment that can take on the next levels of qualification, of which most degrees are in level 7, the diplomas are in level 6, there are certificates that are in level 5, and the curriculum transformation is going to attend to such because we have to respond to stakeholders in various sectors who either in their own industries are requesting a diploma of this or a diploma of that. The content needs to be elevated to a level 6. So the university will, in the transformation, look into moving the level 5 qualifications to short courses or courses that are done not as a full year or 2-year program, but something that a person can do in a shorter term. And therefore, we concentrate on level 6 and level 7. And for us to continue taking in learners at level 3 when there is an opportunity to have them at level 4 may be a bit challenging, or still allowing us to have the challenges we may have. So as such, UNAM is therefore prepared just to take in UNAM is prepared to appreciate the students from AS because they will bring the benefits as just have been indicated. Thank you. Listen.
Thank you very much, Registrar, for that. So, as you can see from this, that it is our view that the position of UNAM, as has been said before, does not contradict the stance of the Ministry of Basic Education and is in line with what Cabinet had approved, that learners who choose to pursue tertiary education or university education should progress to AS. We cannot now compete with basic education for that top cream. If we compete with basic education for that cream that wants to progress to AS, we will take them and there will be no candidates for AS. So we have to embrace the reform and ensure that it succeeds. We are therefore ready to enroll learners coming with a combination of NSSCO and NSS CAS subjects in 2022, when that first cohort will have completed their basic education. For us, access with success is key. Access that doesn't enable you to succeed is not access. It becomes costly. And it's very, very fundamental point that we take into account as a university. Having said this, I did refer earlier that there was a committee in which the university was serving, which worked on the task of creating the structure for the Namibian education system. And my colleague, Prof. Mas, and several others were serving those committees. And I would like her now to just give the background to that and what that structure looks like. So we understand what was envisaged. How does this Namibian education structure look like? From basic to higher education, we have to operate as a system that feeds, that coordinates, that steers, that benefits from what others do. We cannot survive if basic education is not giving us what we need. Neither can it survive if we can't give them the teachers that they need to succeed. And it is very, very important that we take these matters as per evidence, as per decisions of cabinet before us. And that's what we have done, and that's what we stand with as a university. I would now like to invite Prof. Mas to give that background and just share what that structure, and I believe that structure was agreed at least until 2014.
Yes, thank you.
And what the exits are. We are not against any exit, whether it's at grade 11 or grade 10, wherever. We are fully embracing that. We just think when you exit at a certain level, there's somewhere where you must go.
Thank you so much, VC. You know, it is actually extremely exciting for me to sit here in 2021, having been part of this process, and see the realization of what we have discussed as a committee. This committee was established under the leadership of NIET, and had representation of all the important role players at the time. It was NIET themselves, the ministry through the Examination and Assessment Division, UNAM, the NQA, the then Polytechnic of Namibia, NTA, IUM, and NAMPOL. And this committee started their deliberations at the beginning of 2013 through 2014 and developed a blueprint for the education structure of Namibia. And before we look at this blueprint, I think we need to ask the question, why was there a need for change? Why was there a need for reform? And I think if you look at all the documents, also those documents that the VC referred to, these reforms, both in basic education and higher education, was informed by the need to realize the goals and objectives of Vision 2030. And our political leaders and our educational leaders clearly understood that there is no way that this country can realize Vision 2030 if there is no change. And this blueprint is really the recipe for change. And if we look at it, it's quite interesting, and it really summarizes a lot of the things that we have talked about this morning. And maybe let's start at the very, very bottom, because I think sometimes we forget the importance of what has been added right at the bottom there, in that orangey block there, the pre-primary, the compulsory pre-primary that lays the foundation for everything that comes. One of the most important aspects of this change in the education structure is that we moved from the previous 7-3-2 system, 7 years of primary education, 3 years of junior secondary, and 2 years of senior secondary, to a system where we add pre-primary, then followed by a 7-2-3 system. So the junior secondary was condensed to 2 years, and the senior secondary that prepares the learners either for the world of work or for further education was increased to 3 years of study. And what is interesting in the diagram that you can see are all those blue lines, all these exit points and points where you can move from the one to the other. The whole purpose of our deliberations was to ensure that we have a flexible system, a system that will respond to the needs. So interestingly, you see there are two streams. Right from the secondary phase, the junior secondary phase, there are two streams. There's the academic stream and there's the vocational stream. But both of those streams allow pathways into higher education, into further education. This is a very early version that you see on your screen. There were a few changes to it later on, but the backbone stayed exactly the same. You see, we still refer there to UNAM at the top, University of Technology and Applied Science. That was one of the earliest suggestions of the new name of the Polytechnic, because these reforms happened in parallel. But it's very clear from here, if you look at the yellow block, that is called the lower and middle secondary academic stream or vocational stream. That culminates, that is actually in two parts. That's not very clear from the color coding there, but it's actually two parts. It is the junior secondary grade 8 and 9, and then the new NSSCO in grade 10 and 11. It's a 2-year program. And if you go on the website of Cambridge, you will also see that NSSCO is described as a middle secondary qualification. A middle secondary qualification aimed at learners between the ages of 14 and 16. That prepares the learner for the world of work and non-formal education, and also prepare the learner for entry into the AS level, which in turn will give entry into the university. But what I would like you to see from this diagram, ladies and gentlemen, is how all of these things eventually moves and articulates into that blue block that we have on the right-hand side, into society. And this is extremely important, and you will see whether a learner, unfortunately, exits at primary level, or at junior secondary level, or at NSSCO level, or at university level, they all have an impact on society. They all have a value with what they are coming with. It's not that the one is better than the other one. All of them impact society in one way or another. And Prof. Gideon has also indicated the importance that we gave in our curriculum transformation to the impact to society that we want from our. But that is the same for the NSSCO. And let me tell you, the new grade 11 NSSCO do prepare the learners better than the legacy program for the world of work, for the non-formal. It also prepares them, because the other important thing about this diagram are all these blue arrows going back. It provides pathways for our learners, even if they exit there, to come back to the system. There are various pathways. There is NAMCOL, there are other institutions. There's also our own programs through recognition of prior learning, mature age, etc. So exiting at grade 11 and not entering the university or other further education and training at that point is not a dead end for anybody. It is just something that may be needed at that particular time, but the opportunities are there to go back. And as I say, this was one of the earlier blueprints. Some of the things changed, the names changed, but the basic backbone stay exactly the same. And it's so exciting to sit here and to know that we have reached that grade 11 now. We have that first exit point here, but we also have the exciting opportunity of those who qualify for AS to finish their basic education, to go into that new grade 12 year, into the new AS qualification. That will prepare them for further education. But also, if they choose after grade 12 not to go to university or other higher education institutions, they are prepared to make an impact in society in a different way than the grade 11, in a different way than the junior secondary. But they are all there to impact the world of work, to impact our Namibian society. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I will conclude now as follows, and then invite some questions if there are any. First, it is important that we remember that education reforms are for a purpose, and we must always strive to achieve the rationale and primary objective of such reforms, because they benefit the country, they allow for good returns on investments, and they improve our systems and enables the government to achieve what it needs. So I wish to reiterate that we do support the reform process as envisaged. I also want to reiterate that we have no objection to exiting at grade 11 or at level 3. We have no objection with the intention for learners to progress to AS. We know that the Ministry of Education needs these top performers of level 3, which would need to progress to AS. Once they succeed there with a combination, we are very happy to take them as a university. 2, we need to keep in mind the recommendations and analysis of the Tenure Commission, the Presidential Commission on Higher Education, because that's what led to the establishment of the institutions, the norms that exist, and the statutes that are there today. It's this, let me just show those people this I'm just talking from. It's this report. This is the report that even highlights the relationship between universities and government, the University Act, who should sit where, who must be a member of the National Research Commission of the University Council, and so on and so on. It's all in here. And also the norms that the universities must follow to be able to get to their peers internationally. It's very important, and I would like to urge all of us to familiarize ourselves with what was intended with this. I also want to just conclude what I have said and indicated is what was communicated to us by the then Minister of Education at the time. And if there has been any changes, we just haven't been made aware. But this is what we are following, and we believe that with the steps that we have taken, with the curriculum transformation that has been done, in fact, I wish to confirm that the transformation framework itself has already been approved by Senate. What we would be busy doing this year is really looking at the curriculums and syllabuses. And in that, the stakeholders indeed will be engaged, because we really want to know what kind of graduates do you expect, what skills should they have, what core competencies should they have, and what else can we do as a university to ensure that our graduates are not just recipients of papers, but they create employment. They are creative. They don't expect to be employed, but they create jobs. That's what that transformation is about, and we appeal that it should be embraced. I thank you, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Good morning. 1, 2, can you hear me? All right. My name is Kevin. I am a presenter and journalist on Eagle FM. I do the morning show. You're painting a very beautiful picture, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of the effort and work that the university is doing to produce a well-rounded graduate who's not only being prepared for the Namibian domestic market, but also is being fine-tuned to be a global citizen that's able to get a job anywhere and is able to make use of those competencies anywhere in the world. And in the same process, and nobly so, you are exerting pressure downstream to say you need to also make sure that you get your house in order, because the kind of graduate that we need, or the kind of student that we need to take, has to be of this caliber. And that's why you are saying we can't be taking grade 11. We need you to go through grade 12 so that you have these very critical competencies. But at the same time, upstream, further beyond this institution, you do have the market that constantly criticizes you as well, to say that the graduates that you're giving us are not really responding to what we need here. So as much as you're exerting pressure downstream, and as much as you've also brought about these new changes as per the expectations in terms of entry requirements for students that are coming in 2022, I would like to understand if you are also working with industry experts. And what are you going to do also about the very many programs that you continue, and not only UNAM, but universities right across the world that continue to give these programs to these students that are no longer relevant in a tech-driven world that is seeing a lot of these jobs and careers being taken over by machines, and the students end up being useless with their degrees down there. So I just want to find out to what extent is industry involved in the whole process, and are you satisfied with the ultimate products you're giving out there that's being criticized by the industry to say, but he or she is not responding to what exactly we need at work? Thank you.
You know, you are probably familiar with the World Economic Forum, and they have what they have categorized as jobs for the future. You know very well that nobody gets trained nowadays to be a typist. My view is that secretaries are probably not needed anymore. What is needed more are office administrators, if you take that level. Drivers are not going to be needed because they will be automated self-drives. And we have seen this in many, many big firms abroad. If you go to Australia in the mining, in the mines, those tippers and so on are automated. They drive themselves to go pick the ore, drop it and return. Forklifts are automated 24 hours. If you want to think that you want to be a driver of a forklift, in the future that there will be no possibilities for such jobs. Now, this becomes a greater debate of, does technology create unemployment? Or do we create jobs that would allow more people to be employed, or jobs that are decently paying and create and add value to lives? Now, the approach we are taking as a university is we take into account those core competencies for the jobs of the future. And we have worked very closely in developing the framework and benefited greatly from the Commonwealth Association of Universities and Times Higher Education. As I said, the framework itself has been done and approved by Senate. This year is a year of consultation with the industry, with the public sector, with the third sector, the NGOs, and so on. And we are keen to hear, like you're asking, we are keen to hear what are the competencies they expect and how do we achieve that together. We have moved as a university to a situation where we would allow people from the industry to be appointed in the university to teach, to lecture, real practical things. If you work for John Deere and we want you in a mechanical engineering program, we cannot expect someone who has not seen a tractor to teach it. We will want to have the industry involved to actually teach fixing things in real time as they have been doing it. So that is what really we are expecting. But this is a technical question, So I'm going to put it back to technical people who are actually on a daily basis involved in this curriculum framework. The colleagues, Prof. and
you see, just to say a few words, and I think probably I will now push it to my colleagues who are very much on the ground. Thank you very much for the question. Look, during the curriculum transformations, we decided actually to focus on all the elements that need to help us to understand what is really the problem out there. It took us a year to really, do research, engage, and also do some desktop, studies. So we are aware of what is the talk out there about the graduates and all those type of things. That's why we are appreciating what the reform from basic education is bringing to us. We don't want to blame anyone, but we want to say, what have we learned from the previous process, and what is that we now need to do to improve the situation? We are taking everything into consideration. So what we are doing now, before we start actually with mounting the actual curriculum or syllabus, we want now to engage the industry, completely doing away with what we have as a curriculum, and start engaging the industry to ask, what is that you need? Those are the few fundamental issues that we should now use to build on what is really that should stand as a new curriculum that should serve and produce a well-rounded graduate, as you have referred to. So I think that is really what we want to do, because we need to eliminate all these. We might not get it right now, but I'm sure we'll have a very good percentage of what we want to achieve within a very short period of time. And I'm very confident, because we have learned, we have also looked into issues that you have spoken about, and I think the VC have also spoken about. What technology is bringing is not only doing away with jobs, but is also bringing new opportunities for new jobs. So we also understand it. We are asking our professors to say, what new opportunities that you can see, so that then this is also part and parcel of what you are now going to reform. So we really have done quite a lot. We will invite you. I think there was quite a lot of discussions around media's, issue, because people that we are producing, maybe VC would say it, because he was also very, very vocal on that. So, so I think there are quite a lot of things that are really happening, and I think you will also come on board to give your input when the time is right. Thank you. Prof. Mas, or you go.
If I can just add to this, I hear what you are saying about the upstream pressure. Upstream there is the market and there is credit. This is exactly why we are changing. If we didn't think that there was something wrong, or if we think everything was perfect, we wouldn't change. But obviously, so this curriculum transformation is driven by a number of things. The basic education reform is one. The inadequacy of our own curricula and graduates through our research is another one. But then a very important driver of the whole process is also the fourth and the fifth industrial revolutions. And this is infused into the new framework, that our students will be prepared to be digitally literate. We will have issues of robotics, of understanding informatica as core modules in our programs. So this is not a curriculum review. We are not just changing our curricula, we are totally reinventing them. Even the structure of the curriculum, the way we are organizing our semesters will be different, so that we provide time for skills development. One of the issues with university curricula typically is that there's so much emphasis on content, and you need to get through all of this content, and you can't get through the content because there's not enough time. That the students become rote learners. They just give you back what you taught them, and this is not what our new curricula is entailing. We are creating time in the curriculum for skills development, for industry experience, and things like that. So yes, we are aware of the upstream pressure there, and this is why we are changing our curricula. But we are not only changing our curricula, we are changing our process of curriculum development. And I think that's very important. As you may be aware, in the past we developed curricula, and then when we are finished, we had a stakeholders workshop, and we presented them with the curriculum and say, is this okay? Do you suggest any changes? And that we realized that was not very effective. We now start with that process. We start without a curriculum, but with our stakeholders to ask them, what are the needs out there? What do you want? And then with their input, we develop the curricula, and then we take it back. We will take it back in the end. But we start the process, and it's a totally new way of thinking. So yes, indeed, but our curriculum transformation, and that's why we don't call it a curriculum review, because it isn't. It's a totally new process and a totally new approach that we are following.
Maybe it's just a minor thing that I can add to what my two colleagues said about this, and it's really a nice question that you have, posed to us to reflect, and we have been reflecting about it, is the mere fact that the previous curriculum in how we looked at industry attachment will no longer be the same through this transformation. It will no longer be just something you will do for a month or 2 weeks in your last year, in your final year, for an example. It will now underscore the whole new curriculum process in that corporate work integrated education will become such a critical part of this transformed curricula, in that it will be holistically across the board. It will be paid attention to, all the time. And that attention that we need and relationship with industry, that's actually what we are after now in this transformation process. So that's critical for us to understand. But also the mere fact that we realized we had to start to map the attributes, the employability attributes of our current students and the new ones coming, in that it can no longer be the same. So we invited already through a curriculum mapping, employability mapping exercise, some of the stakeholders, one of which I can mention offhand to you, is we invited the law industry to come and sit with our LLB that's now running both distance and online mode, and to give us their inputs and to give us their expectations. I can tell you it was really exciting, because it made us to go back to the drawing board and to rethink what we have currently as learning outcomes and how we assess them. Because we have to focus on the world of work, the employability attribute that the stakeholder would need, like you mentioned them, for the future. So thank you for that question to all.
Thank you very much.
I think that was really a good question. And the transformation that the colleagues are talking about partly also has started because the mindset has shifted. If you look around, you will see that at the advent of Corona in March last year, some of our students actually were already engaged. They have the brain to think, to participate into creating new ways to coping with Corona. I mean, even our sanitizers that we have, which is, I think you are aware of it, our students really participated, and they were happy to actually to put into practice some of the things that they have studied. If you look at our science students, they are selling mushrooms which they produce themselves. I don't know, Prof, I think you know more about these things, but I know them because they come to me and say because I love mushrooms. And they are still studying, they are already employed. They are employing themselves. In fact, they are employing others and their families. They should tell you the things they do at the villages where they come from. So I think the transformation, somehow the mindset have already shifted. I mean, our agricultural students, you see them already trying to produce. I'm just saying this because I'm a consumer and, and I want to support our students. So indeed, I think we are engaging with the industry, and I think it's because of this that our students are seeing that I'm learning for a purpose. This learning is not just to learn theory and, but there is a world out there to which I have to contribute, and I think they are doing that.
I think maybe before I invite others, just to say in your field, for example, of journalism, what we would desire, and this is still up to, it's just my own thoughts, but it's up to for discussion. We would desire journalists to be what I would call science journalists. You cannot be reporting on locusts and you'd have no understanding of how they behave and what you are just getting information reporting. So we hope that if you want to study journalism, you have some idea of what you want to focus. Maybe as an economics journalist or nuclear something, some sort of thing. So you would do basics in that particular field, whether it's engineering or science, and then you move to do the journalistic principles and so on, so that you speak with you report with authority, not just because this is so I hope I'm clear. This is what this curriculum wants, transformation wants to achieve. Please. All right, let me then thank you all, for those following on live stream and all those present. Thank you so much. And this is not the end of our engagement. We will continue to engage on the curriculum transformation. I want to just conclude by saying, please, we urge those who wish and are able to progress to AS to do so. It is good for this country, it's good for you. Thank you so much.
Greetings to you from Namibia. Greetings to you from all of us. Greetings to you from Namibia. Greetings to you from all